Coming up on Network Africa, Zimbabwe's army has taken temporary control of the country in a move set to target criminals around President Robert Mugabe. A background on the Mugabe administration, which has been in power since 1980, when the country gained independence. And major political parties in Anambra State, southeast Nigeria, round off their campaigns ahead of Saturday's governorship elections. Welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers. Just 24 hours after Military Chief General Constantino Chiwenga threatened to intervene to end a purge of his allies in Mugabe's ZANU-PF, Zimbabwe's military has confirmed that it has seized power in a targeted assault on criminals around President Robert Mugabe, so it says, but gives assurances that the 93-year-old leader and his family are safe. In a short broadcast on national television, which was seized overnight by soldiers, a spokesman for the military said it expected normalcy to return as soon as it has completed its mission. Meanwhile, opposition MP Eddie Cross says that he believes the First Lady, Grace Mugabe, has fled to Namibia.
After 37 years under President Robert Mugabe, Zimbabwe's military has seized control of the country, but denies it is staging a coup. Hours after armored vehicles were spotted closing in on the capital, Harare, soldiers stormed the state broadcaster early on Wednesday, broadcasting live a message to the nation.
Firstly, we wish to assure the nation that His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe and Commander-in-Chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, Comrade R.G. Mugabe, and his family are safe and sound, and their security is guaranteed. We are only targeting criminals around him who are committing crimes that are causing social and economic suffering in the country in order to bring them to justice. As soon as we have accomplished our mission, we expect that the situation will return to normalcy. To the civil servants, as you are aware, there is a plan by the same individuals to influence the current purging which is taking place in the political sphere to the civil service. We are against that act of injustice, and we intend to protect everyone of you against that. To the judiciary, the measures underway are intended to ensure that, as an independent arm of the state, you are able to exercise your independent authority without fear of being obstructed, as has been the case with this group of individuals.
Soldiers and armored vehicles have blocked roads to the main government offices, parliaments and the courts in central Harare, while taxi ferried commuters to work nearby. The military detained Finance Minister Ignatius Chombo, who was a leading member of the G40 faction of the ruling party. The army has outlined what it calls a mission. Although neither Mugabe or his wife Grace, who has been vying to succeed her husband as president, has been seen or heard from, the military says the president isn't the target. Some residents in Zimbabwe's capital, Harare, are hoping for peace in this dire situation. Meanwhile, the United States Embassy in Harare is warning staff to stay at home due to the political uncertainty. The self-styled grand old man of African politics has led the country for 37 years since its independence from Britain. He is widely celebrated on his home continent, a stark contrast to the West, where he is seen as a dictator who ruined one of Africa's most promising economies and is willing to resort to violence to stay in power.
He took the mantle of power since 1980 and became president in 1987. Robert Mugabe is one of the world's most controversial leaders. Let's take a look at his 37 years in power.
Robert Mugabe was born on the 21st of February 1924. He has been president of Zimbabwe since 1987, after the independence from Britain. He previously led Zimbabwe as Prime Minister from 1980 to 1987. He chaired the Zimbabwe African National Union group from 1975 to 1980 and has led its successor political party, the ZANU Patriotic Front, since 1980. Mugabe was born to a poor Shona family in Kutama, southern Rhodesia. He was arrested for making anti-government comments and then convicted of sedition and imprisoned between 1964 and 1974. On release, he fled to Mozambique, established his leadership of ZANU, and oversaw ZANU's role in the Rhodesian Bush War, fighting Ian Smith's predominantly white government. He reluctantly took part in the peace negotiations brokered by the United Kingdom that resulted in the Lancaster House Agreement. That agreement dismantled white minority rule and resulted in the 1980 general election, at which Mugabe led the ZANU-PF party to victory, and he became Prime Minister of the newly renamed Zimbabwe. Having dominated Zimbabwe's politics for nearly 4 decades, Mugabe has been a controversial and divisive figure. He has been praised as a revolutionary hero of the African liberation struggle, who helped to free Zimbabwe from British colonialism, imperialism, and white minority rule. Conversely, he has been derided as a dictator responsible for economic mismanagement, widespread corruption, anti-white racial discrimination, human rights abuses, suppression of political critics, and crimes against humanity.
Meanwhile, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari has called for calm, peace, and respect for the Constitution in Zimbabwe, urging all political and military stakeholders in the country to avoid any action that may plunge the country into unnecessary conflict, which may impact negatively on the region. In a statement by his spokesman, Femi Adesina, the president is quoted as saying, "Every attempt must be made to resolve all contentious issues by constitutional means in Zimbabwe to save the country from avoidable political instability." The appeal by President Buhari comes in the wake of reported military takeover as a result of rising political tension in the southern African country, sequel to President Robert Mugabe's recent removal of former Vice President Emerson Mnangagwa.